Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September meetup for the New Orleans game dev community. My name is Curtis. I'm one of your gracious organizers of the meetup, and we've got a fun time here for you tonight. First things first, if you don't know what the game dev meetup is, it'd be very interesting that you found your way into this live stream to begin with. But in that very strange circumstance, we meet on the third Thursday of every month. We live stream every broadcast, or every meetup, excuse me, right here on YouTube. So you can always catch the live stream while it happens, or if you can't make it that night, the video will be saved forever, and you can listen to us talk about video games and generally be nerds. So with that out of the way, I want to give congratulations to everyone who applied and was accepted to the Xbox Game Camp. I know the acceptance and otherwise not acceptance emails went out a week ago, a few weeks ago. I don't know. Time is a fuzzy subject to me, so I try not to take too much. I'm trying to pay attention to it too much. But if you got accepted to Xbox Game Camp, it's great. Can't wait to see what all the different people are going to be making. I myself am participating, and even if you didn't get accepted, I would say you should still make a video game if you have the time to do it, because the only way to get experience making games, to get better at making games, is to keep doing it. So do that. So without further ado, I want to introduce our esteemed guest for the evening. So joining us from inXile Entertainment is Alex and John. And also we have from the Sea Cave Arcade in the Bywater in New Orleans, Judah. So they're going to give us a short presentation on some stuff about Wasteland 3, which recently came out. And then Judah's going to talk to us about Sea Cave. And it'll be a fun time for all. So without further ado, Alex, John, you may take over here.
All right. So my name's John Winokur. I am a visual effects and technical artist on Wasteland 3.
My name, am I unmuted? Yeah. My name's Alex Kerr. I'm a level designer on Wasteland 3.
If you're not familiar with Wasteland, I can give you a basic description, which I'm going to read right now. In Wasteland 3, you take command of a squad of desert rangers, lawmen, and women in a post-nuclear world trying to rebuild society from the ashes. More than a century after the bombs fell, you are fighting a losing battle to keep your beloved Arizona alive. Then the self-proclaimed Patriarch of Colorado radios promising aid if you'll do a job that he can only entrust to an outsider, rescue his land from the ambitions of his three bloodthirsty children. So it's a post-apocalyptic game with kind of dark humor and intermingling story webs full of interesting characters and lots of cool graphical things. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of those things right now. I'm going to go ahead and just skip around a little bit. So as far as the VFX go in our game, I kind of have it broken down into a few different categories. So we've got sort of ambient weapon and environment effects, weather, since it's such a big thing. I put it into its own category. We've got abilities and items. We've got interactables, weapons themselves, like the actual firing and impacts and stuff like that, statuses, characters, UI, and cinematic visual effects. So those are all these big, all-encompassing categories I came up with. So just some examples of weather effects in the game, like weather on the world map. We had the challenging task of bringing some of these like really thick looking weather particle systems into the gameplay and there's a lot of, I'm just going to go back here. There's a lot of different methods that I ended up trying out while I was implementing this stuff, but the ones that I found worked the best were lots of tiny little mesh triangles combined into one giant sheet that I use to just throw across the screen, basically. So we have like a lot of thick snow, but there's basically no overdraw really, because it's all just these really super tiny mesh particle triangle merge meshes that end up just giving us a lot of real estate on the screen. This is one of the cinematic environmental like setups that we did for one of the trailers, and I thought it ended up looking pretty cool. But it's just got there's a lot of showcasing a lot of different parts of the weather that you get to see later on in the game. That's the airport commune. Then we've got the in-world ambient effects that potentially aren't going to affect the player, but also we've got this kind of stuff. These are hazards which impact the player greatly. So design will be implementing different obstacles for the player, and based on different schematics that they give us, we have to design the ambient effects to sort of fit within what they need. And it was pretty challenging for a lot of these because there was constraints as far as like we need them to scale, things like that, which building scalable particle systems is pretty difficult, but we ended up getting by. I think it looks pretty cool. So there's some environmental ambient effects.
This is one of my favorite parts of the development, actually, is I would periodically pulling down new changes from the repo and just seeing cool stuff going in. Like, oh man, this gun is awesome now. Oh wow, our snow looks like snow. Like, holy moly, that fire is incredible. Like, that's one of the best parts of my job.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, me too. It's just, seeing what design puts in is just, it's really cool to see things just start getting built up, and actually be able to start testing these things out in a setting that's like actually in the context for our visual effects. Because you really never know what things are going to look like until you can get your hands into the mix of everything else, like the collaborative effort. So here's one of the, like, this is the earliest stage of the game, ambush site. There's a lot of different like ambient things going on here. There's also I wanted to talk about like some of the reactive effects that we have. Like, so these are reactive effects that, like, these rockets that come in through the scene, and if you go into certain triggers, you set them off and you get to see like a sort of a cinematic explosion sequence or whatever. But like these interactive effects that we had to set up and come up with a system to sort of make it easy for design to make these things plug and play, so that they can just drop them where they need to be and they do what they need to do. So that was a pretty fun challenge. I like doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is ambush site. We've got, let's see. All right, so this is another like sort of reactive, I call them interactables. So they're interactable objects in the game. They're driven by animation states for the most part. So I came up with design, I came up with like a system for all the different states that we might need. And we have like a generic interactable controller, which is the thing that drives everything. So if you've seen this part of the trailer, there's like a bridge, or if you've even played the game, I guess, there's this bridge that you can lower in several different ways. And depending on what way you choose, it'll trigger different states on the interactable animation controller. So part of what I've been doing is, like, for almost all the interactables in the game, I set up like the different states, and I would also do the animations for, the things, like in this case, the bridge comes crashing down and it gives you a way across. So I would set up those kinds of things. And then, obviously I'm making different kinds of effects for like the sparks, and like when this end of the bridge actually hits the ground, you get to see some, like, a big puff of smoke and some sparks and stuff like that. So that's just another example of interactable effects in our game.
One thing that I want to call that John and the rest of the team were really good at was kind of setting stuff up so that it was usable in multiple ways, not necessarily one-time ways. So like we have these computer terminals, and by default, it's assumed a guy with the hacking nerd stuff skill is going to come up and type on them and make stuff happen. And so functionally under the hood, those can kind of act as switches, but they could also be powered by generators. And we would have like these control cables and power lines that are reactive. And we would be able to set up some fairly intricate things without needing custom code. The way John and our lead designer and the other design and the programmers and everyone set it up made it really easy for the most part for us to go in. And when we needed extra custom stuff, we could ask for it. But it would generally, we could go, if I had an idea like, I kind of want this door to be like open up when this thing happens. It was pretty easy to set up, which was great.
Speaking of doors, I think that's what's coming up next. Oh wait, no.
Something
a little bit more interesting. This is the mind control. Oh wait, no, this is
when you Valor getting his brain overwritten with Reagan. Spoilers, okay. I guess. I mean, if you play the game, that's a thing. Spoilers for anyone who we might talk about some light-ish spoilers for this game.
But yeah, so like this is another example of, it's sort of an interactable, like you come up with it, you come up to it and you can, you see things happening with it. It's not like as directly interactable as say that bridge where, you could shoot it and then it would lower the bridge, it would break the cable, or you can go into like a different puzzle area and then unlock power cables or whatever to make the bridge operate properly. And, we also have these kinds of interactables where there's a set sequence of events that we may want to trigger. So like, VFX artists will be working on it and then handing off different elements to the designer. Or I think in this case, you said, Alex, that there was some like blocking prefabs that you had set up.
I worked together with, we worked pretty closely on this one together. And I think at the time we were also, there was we came up with a solution where basically I sort of made all the states I needed with these prefabs with just very gross looking placeholder objects, like pink cube turns off and on for this. And then I sort of like made a little video showing all the different states and how they were triggered in the context. And he and I worked together on that, but then I sort of just committed those prefabs or shelved them over to him, and then he subbed in VFX for them. This one was a tough one because there's a bunch, it's sort of like 3 different cinematics that can play out depending on what you can do. And so there's like the turning on, turning off state, but also the transferring and this thing happens state, and then this other thing happens state. So it had to be kind of flexible, but also look good in all these different directions, in all these different circumstances. And he did a really good job. I was really impressed when it came out. The other thing is like this object has to act as cover if you have a firefight in here. So there was just a lot. There was sort of a lot on that, the sort of front end that we would try and accommodate for. But for special pieces like this, we would often have setups where we either are sort of, I've set up something with some prefabs, or someone, the VFX artist had set something up and then I'm working with that. I remember for the Reagan statue, we had a whole level, just a test level that was various flavors of things that could happen with the Reagan statue, and like 4 of them. So it was easy for him to test the different VFX without having to have to play through the, opening cutscene of Denver. We would have different solutions for sort of different problems, but also to a large extent, like I said, I would often pop in and cool stuff would have just appeared, which was always awesome.
Yeah, that is cool. And I mean, speaking of cool, like we always got the direction of just like make things look as unique and interesting as possible, like stuff that we've never seen really before. And I think, with a lot of the VFX we put in, like we got to play around with it to like a level that, I mean, I don't really see in games. There's a lot of like interesting color combinations and like noise stuff happening. So, just be on the lookout for that if you're playing it.
That reminds me of something with this specifically. I remember I gave really weird direction with this where I was like, if possible, can the energy beams be red, white, and blue? Like, and he actually pulled it off. And I was like, if that looked like garbage, I'm sorry, don't do it. But can we? And then they did it, and it worked great.
It looked cool and a lot. I mean, I remember getting a lot of other stuff where you're like, red, white, and blue. Let's try it. Let's see what happens.
That's sort of their thing here.
So yeah, I mean, this is just another quick example of interactable. It's just, doors that you would walk through, computers that you would interact with, like Alex said. There's like lockers and different chests and stuff like that. I went in and hand animate all these things with the interactable controller set up, and that was kind of part of my like tech art role in this whole thing. So this is kind of a whole different section where we're talking about like just like different cinematic effects that we got to work on. So like during the course of the project, we had all these different trailer presentation videos. So we got to do some like really fun, like over the top setups with assets that we already have in the game that we're utilizing. So like here's like the Scorpitron entrance, and maybe you've seen it. It's just like a big, I wish I had a video in here right now, but it's just like a big jumping out point. It's like a pretty cool part of that trailer. Then we also have like UI effects in the game. So one of the big elements of the game UI is the radio. And I ended up being like a pretty big part of designing that. Like I set up the effects for, the glowing, I forgot what it's called.
It's like not an oscilloscope, but it's something like that, right? Like the levels.
Yeah, I'll just say like amplitude visualizer, or maybe like, amplitude visualizer. And, like started off with just like, having like going from different concept art pieces and trying to like mesh that with what I could do with the visual effects. I had like a pretty intense VFX shader for our game that I wrote in CG, and it ended up giving us basically the ability to do anything we wanted in almost every situation. And there's variants for like the custom data modules and stuff like that, and like all sorts of different combinations of like warping and noise and like blend modes and stuff like that. So this is one of the places where I used it, and I was offsetting this bar mask that I made to it right now. It goes along with the actual audio that's coming in. There's like we used Wise for our sound in the engine. So Wise like gives you some output of like amplitude in one of the modules that you can attach. So we ended up like hooking onto that and creating like a dynamic texture, which like made things oscillate up and down. And you can actually, see it was weird. There's no built-in amplitude visualizer for Wise. So we had to create our own in that situation. Here's another thing you've probably seen if you've played the game is there's a mode you can go into. It's called Precision Strike mode. So, I had to work on the visual effects for the actual UI, like having it turn around, like the scope kind of turns and focuses in different ways. But also there's like a cool post process that happens in the background as well. So I set up all this kind of stuff and work with the UI engineer and artist to kind of get what they wanted. But also then I was kind of charged with creating like a system that we could use to dynamically highlight different parts of the meshes. So we didn't actually start out building the meshes in this way. So we wanted to be able to highlight different parts of them, but because they're all in different pieces, we couldn't necessarily say like, I'm going to highlight this arm piece because it might be different on different characters. Like it might be a little bit of part of the chest or something like that. So I had to make a way where I made it so we can dynamically recolor vertices based on bone weights. So that's how I ended up doing that. And I think it came out pretty cool. So
really did. I remember when they were talking about the design for that system, I was like, that sounds pretty intense. Like that sounds like it's going to take a lot of things from a lot of people. And then it came together pretty quick, and it was a lot of, John did it, which was pretty common on the game too. But I remember seeing that and being like capturing some footage for a trailer and being like, this looks like something that a lot more people worked on than actually did. I was really proud of our team effort there.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised at what you can do if you really just stop and think about it for an hour or two. So then I'm kind of just going in, like, I went from UI, now I'm kind of going into, like, we've got a big variety of weapon effects in Wasteland 3. There's just so many different types of weapons, and I kind of had to utilize what tools were given to me to sort of make all this stuff happen. Like that lightning bolt uses the same bullet as these regular handguns, but it just utilizes it in a different way. So I was actually able to just get like a lot of variety and a lot of different treatments for all the different weapons that we wanted to pull off. And like, that obviously we have robots and like, animals and all these different types of things. Here's like a vehicle weapon firing off and blowing up a dude. The vehicles were pretty cool. They were challenging because they're such a large scale thing, but we don't want it to completely overshadow everything that's happening. So I know there was a lot of iteration done on just making sure that the vehicle stuff just sort of fit well into the combat space. And then this is one of my personal favorites, like that I did, is like the flamethrower in the game. I really like how that came out. Like I did this one fluid sim early on, and I loved it, and I just used it everywhere. And like, I got so much mileage out of it because I did some like remapping in the shader for the colors and like the color value ranges, and like I was just able to get so much out of it. And it was just like a small fluid sim, like a smoke sim that I did early on. So now I'm moving more into like some technical art stuff that's going on. One of the coolest things in the game is that we have these cinematic conversations. And here's like an example of one of those, my favorite one. This is Liberty. But there's some crazy stuff that we're looking at here. We have like a nice PBR character shader that I worked on and helped set up. And then I also set up this nice skin shader that we were utilizing. So like we got to have, some fake subsurface stuff going on, and you can see it in all the characters when there's like lights behind them. Another example of effects in the game being these cinematic conversations have like unique effects that are happening in them, and they're just, more quote unquote cinematic. They want to be more presentable. So we've got these like, situations where we've got these like big lights behind the character, and this is like a one-off thing. So it's specifically designed only for this cutscene.
I remember we moved a lot of trees. We spent a lot of time like moving the trees around the level because they would look, at various stages of this, they would look, weird. Like at one point, I think there was a tree right kind of at her left shoulder, and it was like, why is it? It just, the whole shot seemed to be tree focused. And
right.
We did passes where we took them all out, and it was funny too because those specific trees, I don't even know if we ended up being able to see them in game. So it wasn't like they had a big impact on gameplay, but it was something we hadn't thought a lot about until the cinematic conversations started coming together.
Yeah. So like, then there's, you were talking about moving trees and stuff. There's also like things that would turn on and off just for these cinematic conversations. With like, we leveraged, the ability we leveraged everything we had to be able to just give the exact like images that we wanted to with this stuff, which is like, it's cool to be able to have like, if you get some technical knowledge, you can do simple things like that, but then you can also do bigger things. Like you can, start writing skin shaders, or like get into, making sure PBR materials look correct and stuff like that. So this is probably one of my favorite cinematic conversations. So definitely look forward to that if you're playing.
Mine too. I think this one and then Brago. Brago might be my favorite.
Yeah, Brago's great too. I don't have a screenshot of him in here, but so now this is continuing the technical art side of it. So like a big challenge that I had early on was trying to figure out how to marry the weather and the interiors in the game. So like you'll notice that when you go inside an interior, there's no, you won't see snow inside. And
just for some context for people watching, sorry, this is a roof that is faded away. So that guy on the outside is in the outside. When he's a certain range away, this area is covered. He's gotten within the fading roof range, so now the roof has peeled back. So we need to know that this is specifically interior, but the snow on the outside is still outside.
Right. So I did like I did some like stenciled masking techniques and applied that to all of the weather effects, but I also applied it to some of the post effects as well, because we didn't want certain post effects in the interiors, whereas we wanted some of them. So it sort of it gave me like a lot of control over what we wanted to show in the interior versus the exterior of the different scenes in the game. So that was pretty fun. Let's see here. Okay, so just continuing the technical art stuff. This is the fur shader that I worked on. I had to. I ended up making it deferred. Like I could have made it, forward and transparent and stuff, but I actually liked having it be deferred, and I thought it looked pretty. It looks pretty convincing the way it is, but deferred allowed us to start throwing decals on it, and just all sorts of other different stuff that we wanted to do with it. The hair shader as well, I thought this is like a really good looking hair shader. I got to work on that a little bit too. And then he's got a bottle in his hand, which in the actual game itself, and I don't think it's in the trailers, but you'll see him like it'll be sloshing around in there, like liquid will be in there. And so I did this like double-sided, like fake simulated liquid inside glass shader. So it was like a special shader just for his bottle. So we ended up having like, there were situations, we didn't have a lot of unique shaders, but there were situations like this where it's like, wouldn't it be cool to see like, his special whiskey or whatever sloshing around in the bottle, and then he takes a swig of it and it actually drains out. So I had like, animated parameters that were controlling like the amount of liquid that was in the bottle, and it was always like it was always going down in the Y. So it was like it appeared to slosh around with it. It looked pretty convincing. So that was cool. Let's see what's next here. So here's another thing that we I had to get into the game. We actually started with the version of Unity that didn't have the HDRP. So this is all done in the legacy deferred rendering pipeline. So I had to actually figure out, like, it doesn't come with a decal system. There's examples online, but I wanted a decal system that had all the different elements of PBR in it. So that's kind of what we ended up with. And I think it looks pretty cool. But, we did like some instancing, we did animating stuff, we did some, like some of my sprite sheets and stuff like that. So we ended up using it like all over the place. I got a lot of detail out of it, and I think it came out pretty cool. And I think that's it as far as my stuff goes. And I've got a little bit of stuff here from Alex that he's gonna talk about also.
Sure. I'm not able to go as in depth, I think. A lot of my work happens on sort of the block outside, and then scripting, and then cutscenes. But I'm a level designer, and I guess it technically be game designer, but we kind of have our hands in everything. We set up conversations, we set up cutscenes, we do some combat, and we have dedicated people who sort of specialize in each thing. But each level designer would have a few different levels, and some of them got passed around, some didn't. This is Patriarch Palace, which was a level that got passed to me a little bit later in development when it was basically done. So I just tweaked a few things. I didn't do any major crazy changes. I think I did set up a bunch of examinables that weren't there before, like, we really want to make sure you can click on this thing and it highlights whatever, and I added the little Liberty puzzle and the adoption papers thing, and some stuff around the edges, but I was mostly working off what was already there, which was quite solid. But it's obviously a big important scene for the game, so we did invest, because you spend a lot of time coming back there. So we spend a lot of time in there. Our process is generally to start with block out. And actually, we start with a, John, do you think you could scrub back to the airport shot that you had very much earlier, we tend to start with a, actually in this game, our process would start with like a 2D top-down map, just like flat in Photoshop based on a grid. And we would sort of lay out very roughly, okay, here's we're gonna have collision, walls, elevation, cover, you know, ramps. And then we would basically project it down onto a quad. And then first step was to, you know, walk around in game with it just projected and see and sort of pretend, all right, I'm walking and playing in the lines, like, you know, is this the right place for the wall? Is there enough distance? Blah, blah, blah. And then the next step would be to extrude up very rough, like, all right, here's actually some walls that we'll do. We used Pro Builder, which at first I think was an add-on, then later got built into Unity. And that made it really fast to just, you know, go around and pull up. If you've ever used SketchUp, it's a lot like that. And then very early, actually, we got placeholder prefabs in for stuff like cover. So we would have these big, tall, dark purple rectangles for the tall cover, and then smaller light purple rectangles for the light cover. And then, so we could, and even interactables, we had placeholder interactables very early. Like I started on the game, I think just after pre-production, and there were all, I think there were already the cover props in. We could stamp those down really quick. And I think the interactables came in like my first or second week, so we could already hook up doors and stuff. So fairly quickly, we could get a, you know, level running with some enemies, with some interactables, a lot of placeholder stuff like cool battle happens here, cool cinematic happens here, you know, that kind of thing. But our pipeline was basically to go in quickly, make kind of, you know, a messy blockout level, which you guys are familiar with, see how the sizing worked, see how it played. Fortunately, we had a lot of, I didn't work on Wasteland 2, but a lot of the other level designers did. So there were a lot of metrics and choices and decisions made based on that. A situation like this with the airport, one thing that like was a challenge was, all right, how wide should that spaceship be? Like, we want everyone to be able to walk through it. And you're gonna have a party of like 6 people, maybe up to 6, but we also want it to fit on screen. And we want you to be able to tell it's a spaceship. So that was where we would sort of have balancing acts. But, you know, I'm pretty happy with where it netted out. And we would try and get as much as possible done well before we involved, we like roped in art. And so we would call out what kind of custom props we needed. We would also call out stuff like, I remember with the spaceship specifically, I said, this is probably going to change a little bit. Don't make the final spaceship yet, please. I am sure we're going to iterate a bit more on the size and shape. I don't want to ask you to do it a bunch of times. And like a lot of the art exhibits inside, I was like, all right, the footprint's generally this, but you can kind of go nuts in this space. So working with the artist was mostly a matter of us just sort of keeping each other in the loop. And then as production went on and scenes started to get arted out, I've never heard arted used as a verb otherwise, but now I've been using it like that for 3 years. The art would go in and, you know, some of it would kind of come piecemeal. Like suddenly one day cover was real cover that was destructible, which was pretty cool. And, you know, our purple blocks or whatever could get replaced with special kinds of cover. Real doors started coming in. And then art would go in and do passes on specific scenes. So like in this case, I worked with a designer on like, all right, what kind of, you know, there were already some walls I think that we were using, and I worked with a couple different artists on the airport, but it was pretty, it went pretty smoothly. In general, the main thing would be like, okay, we would try and really prototype the gameplay and get the kind of gross feel of, all right, flow, and gross, I mean, not in bad, but in like big, the feel of the flow and the pacing and everything done in the block out. And even to the point of scripting, cut scenes and conversations, we would get those hooked up as much as we could. And then some art would come in. And obviously there's iteration. And there did end up being multiple passes on different scenes. So there would sort of be a first art pass, and then like a more polishy, and then we'd, you know, play through and everything and get feedback, and there'd be more polishy passes. And we tried very hard to like kind of be pretty clear about when stuff was getting locked down. So like, okay, you know, this is now at a point where we, you know, you could make it as pretty as it needs to be and we could ship it. And after that point, stuff, we would try as level designers to not break stuff in crazy ways. So like, all right, I want to move some cover around, fine. But like, that spaceship's been pretty much where in that position for most of the life of this level. And I tried very hard to like not say, you know what, that should be like rotated 90 degrees and connected to another part of the wall. Like, we changed the jetway. Like, you know, we tried to be aware of which stuff would present big challenges and when, and production was really supportive of that. And I personally would I will frequently rope in artists to be like, hey, I'm thinking of making this change, you know, this is going to need, I know this will require light to be rebaked, but this is a dynamic object. It won't. How much of a hassle is this or that? So, or the artist would come back and be like, hey, part of your level is, you know, they'd be more polite, but they'd be like, this kind of part of your level is kind of ugly. Can I fix it? Can we change this or that? And I'm like, yeah, let's change it this way. And a lot of my favorite parts of the different levels actually come out of stuff from the artists, like in Denver Ruins, the Gipper Stronghold, there's those big, like, side windy staircases. Those have actually been there almost since the first pass. And that was me working with the level artist. And he was just like, I want to do some cool windy staircases. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great if we can, you know, get the prop and it fits on the grid. And we worked through it. And I think so many other things in the level changed. And that was one of the few things that kind of didn't change a whole lot because he just kind of nailed it right away. Also, the Reagan statues, they looked really good. I liked them. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on there, but that was kind of our process. Yeah, I don't know if we want to skip through. Yeah, I feel like the airport's a good scene to talk about that stuff. This is the Bazaar. That's not one of my levels. This is Denver Ruins. This is a level I spent a lot of time in. That's the big animate statue of Ronald Reagan. There's inanimate ones in the building proper. You can see here, there's some examples of, you know, there's terrain, there's some static props, there's some dynamic props. Like, that cover around him is destructible. And so those are dynamic objects with their own dynamic shadows and everything else. Whereas like some of those like the big pump jack is not destructible. So I don't remember that guy. I'm pretty sure that guy had baked lighting. Oh no, that's an animated piece. So that probably had dynamic, but stuff would, art was very clever about the way that stuff was sort of divvied up like that. Reagan is technically a spawner. He's a guy like any of those other guys. So, but he's also huge. So we had to handle him a little differently. But I think under the hood, he's basically a turret, like a big fancy turret that talks. And we got his footprint down early, and then we were free to sort of play with his size a bit. And then we locked we had sort of the general idea for how he would work and function pretty early, but we got the statue itself in quite late, mostly just because we were hitting other things, and we wanted, again, we wanted to make sure we were going to do it right, not have to redo it a bunch. That was one, I think, where we got it in, and I remember being just super impressed when it came in. And then originally he didn't jib, he didn't, you know, break apart. If you blow him up now, or he blows up for reasons, he will break apart in this fantastic sequence, which I love, which is nice because then we don't have to have a static mesh hanging around afterwards. Yeah, so I probably have too much to say. I like this a lot. It's fun. This was a fun game to work on. It was really fun working with the whole team. Actually, John and I worked on I remember one of the first times I think I ever talked to you, John, was I was asking about the Machine Intelligence Tower, which is this big robot that has all these TV screens for faces. And I think I wasn't quite sure what was a big ask and what was a small ask at the time. And I was like, okay, so I kind of want to get some like different TV screens that kind of look like this and kind of this. How hard is this? And I think you said something like, yeah, I think I can do that. And then you came back with this amazing array of like animated materials. And I said, wow, how long did this take you? And you're like, it wasn't that hard. It took a little while. And I was like, we need to use all of these right now. They're so great.
It was a lot of fun.
It was fun. And Scar Collector Mines, yay, cool scene. I don't have much more to say on that. Not one of my scenes. I like it. Yeah.
It's cool.
It's fun.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, that's about it for us, I think. I just want to say thanks to the VFX team, Kevin and Quang and Mike, and
I would also like to thank them because it was awesome. And John.
All right.
I guess I thank my fellow level designers, basically everyone on the team.
Thank y'all. That was sweet. It was nice look into the game. The game does look very good. Y'all did a great job. Yeah, thank you all for your presentation. Well, if anyone has any questions, I'll ask you to save them to the end. Kind of want to just keep going here while we still have the Steam. And bring up Judah next, who's going to tell us a bit about Sea Cave, our local arcade. So, Judah, you can go ahead and take it away.
Hey, Judah from Sea Cave here. Sorry, let me move it closer to the mic. Geez, where to start? I think the last time we saw you guys was before the pandemic started. So, as you know, we were doing like speakeasy events on the weekends. We sort of had a bar, not really a kitchen. And then the whole pandemic happened. We also had a Kickstarter that finished successfully. And we've been using the time in the pandemic to really kind of like fill out the rest of the space. And we have all of the kitchen stuff that includes like a griddle, a deep fryer, ovens, kitchen sinks. The gas lines are all put in. Basically everything, all the stuff behind the bar, including the keg coolers and everything. Just a ton of other improvements that needed to get done for inspections are now done. And all of that stuff, all that money and everything went to a good place. I stupidly didn't bring any pictures with me for this thing. I'm dramatically unprepared for this, but yeah, so we've been really doing that. Recently, me and Calder have been getting together though to put together this idea we had that we started also before the pandemic for the Indie Game Cab, which Calder's really kind of a point person on that, but we do have the cabinet for it now. It's an old 1943 stand-up cabinet. It has enough space on the control panel for 2 players. It's originally set up for horizontal screen games, but can actually go to vertical. It's a really nice old cabinet. It's cool. It'll make a perfect home, and has a control panel that's easy to interchange out. So like we were thinking for doing multiple game jams for it for people who want to try to make games for the arcade cabinet and theme it by control scheme. So like we could, because we want to host multiple games in one cabinet. So to do that, you're going to have one control panel at a time. So you need to send controls to everybody. I'm sure if you guys are all game developers, this isn't new stuff. But one of the cool things about doing arcade games is you're not stuck to traditional video game controls. So you get to play with things like trackballs, track spinners, steering wheels, light guns, all sorts of crazy control mechanics. It's a piece of furniture that's made for a video game, basically. So there's all sorts of cool mechanics that you get to mess with. You're not regulated to like the Xbox controller or the PlayStation controller. That being said, the first control panel we would like to start off with is a joystick and button one, because it's just the easiest to begin with. Anything you make for that would be easily to translate to more of like a console type play scenario if you would like to use your project further on down the line for that. But we do have all of that. It has a changeable control panel, so we'll be trying to set up game jams for like multiple different types. Like basically it'll be like, here's the control set parameters. Let's try to make some games under these parameters for one jam, and then sometime go down the line, do a different one, say, okay, trackball games now, or something like that. Or that would be the challenge of it. Beyond that, we're looking to actually be officially open in October. That doesn't mean IndieCab would be ready by then, but you would be able to come back into the space and hang out and do stuff by October, we're hoping. We'll see. A lot of you guys don't know, or you may know, you're not allowed to have video arcades or like statewide specifically blocked out right now. The casino can be open, but a video arcade can't be open. Don't ask me, that's just whatever. We've never really been the most legal space on the planet, so I don't know how much of a concern that is to us right now. we still might do our usual weekend events and just like limit it to 30 people and just be like, come through, see what Latoya has to say about that if she finds out. But like, yeah, things are going good. We're more finished now than we've ever been, and we're going to be a kitchen, a bar, and technically a restaurant with video games in it that, because of COVID, you can't touch. But if you want to play games, you can go to Harris. I don't, yeah. But other than that, things are great. You know, as far as the indie caps, sorry, I'm really disorganized on this. It's my first, believe it or not, first Zoom meeting in COVID-19 ever. I've somehow made it this far without having to do one of these things. But as far as the indie game cap goes, I have so much stuff on my plate with getting all the other arcade cabinets I built up to like, you know, gold standard for the actual grand opening that like I'm really letting Calder organize a lot of that. He has a lot of the specs. I know he's been talking to a lot of people about parts and stuff. I think we're pretty much there with like the guts of the machine. I think all that's left is a monitor. I have tons of arcade controls to use for it, and wood for the control panel and everything else. So once we get that last part, I think Calder's really going to buckle down and try to like start getting that started with the game jam. And we're talking about doing a game jam and having everybody come and paint something on the cabinet itself that's trying to put a game in it. And then, you know, I'll paint coral around the edges of it to, you know, tie it into the space. And we're excited about the indie cabinet. And we're excited about getting open and seeing everybody again. If you donate to the Kickstarter in like 2 weeks, we'll be sending out an email if you want it to be mailed or if you just want to come pick it up if you live in town. But we got all the patches and the pins and they look great. Was I supposed to give a history of my space?
I mean, you can do whatever you want, man. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's all great information. It's supposed to be highlighting people, whatever.
I mean, a brief history of my space, I guess, if nobody knows, I built an arcade out of an art studio about 5 years ago. It's slowly been growing bigger and bigger, and now we're like in a 3,000 square foot space on St. Claude. We've been working on that space now for about a year and a half. So, you know, this was typical bywater DIY art project space, but turned into something like Pizza D or something like that. You know, they started out of like a garage kitchen too, so I think so. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, CK is very cool. If y'all have never been to it, I guess you can't go to it right now, but in the future when you can go to it, it's definitely worth going to.
We'll put the word out, wink wink, when you know, we'd be more than happy to like, because we're talking about doing just like RSVP 30 people max nights. So we'll put the word out in the indie game dev community, so, you know, and a couple of other spots like our Discord server or something if you're on that. But, you know, let us know if you're coming or not, kind of thing. So, yeah.
Cool.
Soon. But yeah, we'll let you guys know.
So if anyone has any questions for our wonderful presenters, you can go ahead and ask them either in the YouTube live chat or in our Discord in the Meetup channel. Speaking of the Discord, though, something I neglected to talk about in the very beginning of this because I'm bad at my job, is that we have a Discord server that you can join. You just scan this QR code that I have up on the screen right here, and I'll invite you to the Discord server where you can learn all about the latest comings and goings of the NOLA game dev community here, and join us for Hack Night every Tuesday. That's about it for that. Let's see, does anyone say anything? No one has said anything. So I've got a question for John and Alex. Y'all did a lot of talked about a lot of like different and interesting effects y'all made within Unity. How much of like custom tooling did y'all have to build to support like these systems and like making things interchangeable and reusable and stuff like that?
There's quite a bit of working as far as like, I mean, I can think of one good example is like, there's a skin mesh emitter on particle systems. And I wanted to be able to show like, you know, particles emitting off of characters skin meshes, like, you know, you're on fire, you're frozen, whatever. Like you've got some cool like wispy stuff falling off of you, you got some fire coming off of you, or you know, whatever. I wanted to work with any character interchangeably, so I had to, you know, there's one thing I wrote where like you had to, or it would find like all the skin meshes, and it would analyze the size of them, and it would figure out like the rate of emission and stuff like that. So I mean, we could do a lot with what was there, but you know, to get those really like cool fine tunings that we wanted, we did have to do some scripting, and luckily, you know, we didn't have anyone dedicated to like VFX scripting or anything like that at the start of the project. And so, you know, I was able to pick up the slack in that department and just made a whole slew of tools for us to be able to like do stuff like that, apply materials that were, you know, generic for different characters, like to work on all the different characters and stuff like that. And I'm trying to think like what else, like there's optimization tools and stuff like that. So quite a bit of scripting.
You had to tie it all into stuff like the ability system and the weapons too, right? Like it was, I know from the designer side, it felt pretty plug and play, but you know, we were obviously shielded from a lot of the under the hood work that happened. You know, that, you know, we unfortunately, when you have someone really good on your team, like John and the other folks, it is easy as a designer to start to take things for granted. Like, oh man, yeah, of course, if I put the this sets people on fire ability, you know, template onto this, you know, kind of ammo or weapon, yeah, it's just, and yeah, that works in game and looks appropriate. You know, and it takes a lot of work to get things there. But yeah, it was, from my perspective, things were very robust. I want to know, how do you do the disintegration effect? That was awesome, and something I hadn't known was even coming.
It's like the same kind of thing, just skin mesh emitter, and then I had something that would, you know, take control of all of the materials on like a character prefab when it was attached, and then, you know, like clip the alpha out or whatever. And so it would, you know, then the particles would inherit velocity from the movement of the character vertices, and then like they would fly off, and it kind of looks like, you know, and they also react to the wind, so it looks like really cool, like it blows off of them and stuff like that.
Yeah, it does look really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.